They glided quietly through the shallow water, holding their shoes in the air. Sounds of tree frogs and cicadas filled the night air. "Listen," Jinx said. "Maybe we can work out a deal." "Shh!" Ned held up his hand. They heard voices several yards ahead. Two men splashed water from the creek onto their faces. "Must be 100 degrees up here," a big man said, kicking off his shoes. "Hotter than Hades, I'd say," the other agreed, his bald head shining in the moonlight. "This ain't much of a rally. I went to one in Arkansas that makes this one look like a marshmallow roast." "Yeah, well, what do you expect from a place that's made up of a bunch of foreigners? They come here and can't even speak good English. I hear there's enough Irish, French, and Italians around these parts to have us some fun tonight." The big man staggered out of the water. "That chili's kicking in. I got to see a man about a dog first." He plopped down on the muddy bank, trying to get his shoes back on. "Who's he talking about?" Jinx asked. "Foreigners, kid. Immigrants. People who come from another country. That's most of the people in Manifest. The whole town is made up of immigrants who came here to work the mines." Jinx detected a note of personal injury in Ned's voice. "Where are you from? I mean, where were you born?" Ned paused before answering. "Truth is, kid, I don't know. Darndest thing, right? Seems like a person should know where he was born, where he's from and who his people are. But I came here on a train when I was real young. Hadley Gillian adopted me, and this is the only home I can remember." He squinted as if trying to peer into his past. His vision must have been too fuzzy, and he shook it off. "The way I see it, those two fellows are the foreigners, and I'd like to put a burr in their britches before they get too comfortable around here." Jinx saw a chance at redeeming himself. "I'll be right back." Ned shook his head, but Jinx slipped noiselessly out of the water. A couple of tense moments passed before he returned. "Here, put this on." Jinx held out a white cloak to Ned, and then put one on himself. "Where'd you get these?" "Those two guys in the creek. They won't miss them for a while. Besides, you said you wanted to put a burr in someone's britches. Well, here's your chance." Jinx held out a handkerchief full of 3-pronged leaves. Ned shook his head, but couldn't help grinning. He looked at the large man trying to put his shoes on. "You're crazy, kid," Ned said to Jinx, "but I like your way of thinking." They put on their shoes, donned the white hoods, and hoisted themselves over the bank. Like flies in a Venus flytrap, they were immediately swallowed up by the crowd of more than 50 men. The point on Jinx's hood fell short of those around him, and the bottom of his robe brushed the ground. Ned and Jinx maneuvered their way casually through the sea of white. They peeked through the eye holes in their hoods, trying to see over the shoulders and big bodies, moving toward the far side of the camp. Suddenly, a wiry man stood hoodless in front of them, wagging his cigar. It was Lester Burden, the mine pit boss. Their path was blocked. "Well, looky here what we got," he said in a gravelly voice. Jinx took a look up to the right, but Burden grasped his shoulder. Ned, a few years taller, stepped closer to Jinx. Whatever happened now, they were in this together. "Got us a babe in the woods," Burton said as a few hooded figures gathered around. Jinx's hands were sweating. If they could just get around these men. He'd straightened up tall. "Yeah, this is only our second rally. Our dad took us to one all the way down in Arkansas. Ain't that right, Cletus?" "Arkansas," Ned repeated, a little slow on the uptake. "Yeah, they sure know how to do things down there. Ain't that right, Cletus?" Jinx was more insistent this time, hoping Ned would catch on. That's right, Emmett. That was really quite a rally down in Arkansas. About twice the size of this one, don't you reckon?" "I'd say that's about right. Of course, that wouldn't be counting the women." "Women?" This seemed to rile one of the hooded men. "They got women in the Klan down in Arkansas?" "Why, sure they do," said Jinx. "Who do you think puts all the hymns in them white sheets?" All eyes descended to the bottoms of the men's cloaks. "See there," Jinx pointed. "You got raggedy bottoms. I'd say you boys could learn a thing or two from the folks down in Arkansas. Wouldn't you say, Brother Cletus?" "I'd say so, Brother Emmett. Come on. I think I hear Pa calling us. Coming, Pa. They left the man gazing downward and made a beeline to the far side of the camp. Over there, Jinx nudged Jed toward a dilapidated cabin that looked long abandoned. The nearby outhouse apparently stood in good stead, since 6 or 7 men waited in single file. The boys fell in line, and Jinx hopped around enough that 3 men let them move ahead. It was dark inside, but he easily found the leaves wrapped in his handkerchief. Making appropriate grunts and sighs, he grabbed a stack of newspaper scraps and dropped them into the open hole, careful not to touch the leaves. He left them in place of the paper, remembering a well-known rhyme. Ivy on the vine, 2 leaves on a stem are fine. Pick up one with 3, and itching you will be. Come on, son. We're backed up out here, came a holler from outside. Yeah, we're backed up here something fierce, Ned yelled. Jinx opened the door. I guess leaves will do in a pinch, but can't you boys afford any newspaper or something? Let's go, Cletus. The boys sauntered away, Jinx yelling over his shoulder. They got toilet paper in Arkansas. Next chapter. A bargain is struck. May 29th, 1936. Miss Sadie looked to be done for the day. Her voice had gotten raspy towards the end of her fortune-telling, and she breathed like she had been carrying something heavy. I wanted my dime back. I said, I want to know about my daddy. That was just some old story from 20 years ago about 2 people I didn't even know. Her eyes narrowed a bit, and she raised her chin as if she had just figured me out. You show me a letter. I tell you what the letter shows me. She wagged a finger. Next time you should be more specific about what it is you are seeking. I didn't plan on there being a next time. So she had told a story about Ned and Jinx, a made-up story about 2 names she read in the letter. I pictured the yellow and green fishing lure in the Lucky Bill cigar box. She knew the mementos I'd had, and she'd zeroed in on the fishing lure mentioned in that letter to conjure her story. Anybody could do that. I looked at Miss Sadie sitting there, her leg propped up. She was a pathetic sight. What kind of purveyor of the future could only tell stories from the past? Go home, she said. Communing with the spirits is a privilege. I have ointment on the top shelf, just behind the baking soda, above the icebox. But I will get it myself. She sure gave good directions if she was planning on getting it herself. I'll get it, I said with no small amount of reluctance. Long as you don't charge me another dime for the privilege. I maneuvered my way through the maze of velvet and fringe into her pantry and retrieved the nearly empty jar of salve. I gave it a whiff and nearly singed my nostrils. What is this stuff? Hawthorn root, she said, scooping out the remainder and rubbing it onto her leg. It helps to increase circulation. She moaned a little, massaging her swollen leg. It was then that I could see the wound that was causing her so much distress. What happened to your leg? I said with a grimace. I catched it on the barbed wire. It is slow to heal. That was putting it mildly. That sore, with its scabbing and yellow pus, looked to have gone from bad to worse and about another mile past that. If you tell me where another jar is, I'll fetch it for you, and then I'll be on my way. There is no more. I gave the last of the hawthorn root near the cemetery last night. But I am sure there is more to be found elsewhere. I looked outside at the scorching sun. Maybe you haven't been outside lately, but there's not much growing around here. There's not enough water to fill a thimble. There is water. It remains deep and hidden, but there is always water. How do you know? Because I know what my father knew, and his father before him. It is what diviners know. Your people are all fortune-tellers? I hope they were better at it than she was, but I didn't say so. No, we are a family of diviners. We see and understand things most people overlook. We read the signs of the land. You mean like those hill people who walk around with a jiggly stick, thinking they can find underground wells? She made a guttural, scoffing sound. Pah! What does one need with a stick? All one needs is eyes and ears. The earth speaks loud enough when it wants to be heard. I was beginning to have no doubt that she heard things. The woman wasn't right in her head. All right, then. You have a nice day, I said, backing toward the door. I believe there is still a matter to be settled about my broken pot. It survives a boat ride all the way from Hungary and is now in pieces. Hungary. That explained the accent. I stood my ground. Well, it wouldn't be broken if you hadn't taken my compass. Take your compass. I am out to gather hawthorn root and find something on my property. How am I to know it is yours? And she had a point, I thought as she went, rubbing her leg. I was surprised she could make it to the cemetery and back, but figured that's why her leg had swelled up so bad today. I'd offer to pay for the pot, but I don't have that kind of money. Yes, it is worth much more than the coin you have remaining in your pocket. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. I didn't believe in fortune tellers, but how had she pulled that one off? So, Miss Sadie said, knitting her fingers together, it appears you have something I want, and I have something you want, she said with her W's like V's. You have something I want, and I have something you want. You have my compass, but what could I have that you want? Want. 2 good legs, she said, punctuating each word. I wasn't sure where this was going, but I knew I wasn't going to like it. You will come here to do a few odd jobs. Any job for her would be odd, I thought, but she had me over a barrel. I did break something of hers, and I wanted my compass back. For how long? I asked. You will know when you have finished. She handed back the letter I'd given her, and suddenly I found myself heading towards the front door. I stopped short. There, just inside, was my compass, hanging on a single nail, daring me to take it. I gave it a strong look, but I knew I'd broken her pot and needed to make restitution. I marched down her rickety steps, a bead of sweat already trickling its way down my neck. Curiosity had set in. I ran back to Shady's place, clomped up the wooden steps to my room, and reached under the floorboard for the Lucky Bill cigar box. Dumping the contents onto the bed, I found the fishing lure I hadn't paid much attention to. The words from Miss Sadie's story came back to me as I looked at the fancy green and yellow spotted lure. The underside of the lure, in pretty gold lettering, Wed Wiggle King. So colorful it'll catch a blind fish. At that moment, I wish I'd never set foot on the path to perdition.